Good moment, baseball universe, no matter where you are on the planet. I'm Jake Robinson, and this is Backwards K. I want to thank you all for being here live on the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network. I'm coming out of Pawleys Island, South Carolina, high atop the Robinson Gearing Studio Complex, and I'm honored to speak to tonight's guest. He has one hell of a story. You're not going to want to miss one word of this. His story arc, it has all the elements of a modern-day tragedy, but with the redemptive storybook chapters that you wish all your tragic heroes could have in the end. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you former Angels, Royals, Blue Jay slugger, Mr. Willie Aikens. Willie, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing okay, Jake. How you doing, man?
I am blessed. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to me. I really, really appreciate it. Now, before we start, I moved here to Pawleys Island, South Carolina about 4 years ago. I've grown to truly love it here, but there are plenty of places in South Carolina I've never been to. And I see you grew up in Seneca, South Carolina, which is about 5 hours west of me. Have you ever been to Pawleys Island?
No, I haven't.
Okay, because I would think that, like, a place like Pawleys Island would be so foreign to, like, Willie Aikens as a kid.
Yep.
We're about, I would say 20 miles south of Myrtle Beach, and it's certainly a far cry from where you grew up in. You noted that you grew up in a very poor Jim Crow law, South Carolina. I need you to paint a picture of your meager beginnings of your life, the house you lived in, challenges you faced as a kid growing up, your home life.
Yeah, it was tough. Most people don't know where Seneca is. So, I tell you, have you ever heard of Clemson, where they have the college at? And
right.
Most people have heard of Clemson before. So Seneca is about 4 miles from Clemson. I was born in 1954. I grew up in the South, and just like you said, I remember the signs they had on the water fountain, whites only, blacks only, the bathrooms, whites only, blacks only. I went to a segregated school for 8 years. 1969, they finally integrated the schools. And
was that your high school? Were you in high school?
Yeah.
Then? Okay. What year was that? Was that your senior year? What year was that in high school?
No, 1969 was my first year of high school.
Okay.
So all 4 years of high school, I went to integrated school.
Now, let me ask you something. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just want to touch on that right there.
Yeah.
Did you play a lot of integrated sports back then before this time, and then it changed, or were you pretty much an integrated sports player at the time anyway? Were blacks playing against whites?
No, everything that I did up until in the 8th grade was all blacks. Mine.
And how much?
Little league baseball teams were black.
Right.
Junior high, but one of the things where I played that was mixed was American Legion baseball.
Okay. And that was.
Once I got to high school, it was integrated though.
Okay, and did you? How was that kind of a culture shock playing against white ball players? I mean, that had to be certainly different. Or were you just like a kid, like, it is what it is?
Well, once I got to the white schools and everything was integrated, the uniform became better. We had more equipment and everything, and then my exposure as a baseball player, football player, and basketball player, it became more widespread because you had a scouts for colleges and everything recruiting more at the white schools than you did at the black schools.
Right. And I noticed I read in your book here. I've done a lot of research on you. It said that you were pretty much bigger than all the other kids. Your mother was a street lady. She worked in the streets. Your father, you never knew your biological father. Your stepfather died when you were very young. He was an alcoholic. So I'm assuming that sports was probably like your escape. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yep, it was. Like you said, I grew up under stepfather. I never met my dad before. My stepfather was in and out of the county jails, and I guess one thing that kept me busy, and I was pretty good at it, was playing sports. You know, I played the major sports, football, basketball, and baseball, and that somewhat gave me a chance to get out of the house from some of the chaos that was going on inside the house too.
And let me ask you something. I've always wanted to ask you this as a kid. And ever since I saw you, and I'm going to say you were on my radar in 1980. I'm a 9-year-old Orioles crazy kid living in Baltimore. You're pretty much blowing up my team, Dennis Martinez in particular, every night. And you were like this larger-than-life being to me. And the first thing that struck me about you was your name, Willie Mays Aikens. And just that middle name, as a 10-year-old kid, it made you like a rock star in my mind. How did you get that name? Did that name ever carry too much weight for you, being Willie Mays Aikens, wearing 24? How did the whole Willie Mays Aikens thing come about, and how did it evolve?
Well, the only extra weight that it carried was that people think or thought I was named after the famous Hall of Famer baseball player. And, you know, Willie Mays was my idol growing up as a kid.
Really?
But my mom told me that she named me after my uncle, Willie. I have no idea where the Mays came in at. I know we had a doctor in our neighborhood, and his name was Dr. Mays.
Okay.
But my mom was not a sports fan. So it's no way in the world that she could have named me after the famous baseball player. You know, it's just a coincidence that I was named that. It was a coincidence that I grew up to become a professional baseball player.
That's great. And like I said, as a kid, man, you were like a rock star. Willie Mays. You're not just Willie Aikens. You're Willie Mays Aikens. You know what I mean? Like, I can't tell you how that affected me as a kid just to hear your name said over the loudspeaker. And
once I became a professional baseball player, and when people used to call me that, I used to hate it, man.
Did you?
Yep, I did, because I know most people only were saying that my name was that.
Right.
But I used to get asked so many times, was I named after the baseball player? You know, and sometimes I said I was, and sometimes I said I wasn't, just to get a people to stop bothering me and stuff. But, I always wanted to make a name for myself.
And let me build on top of that question right there. Like, you say you really there was a period in your life when you didn't like being called Willie Mays. Was there like some kind of part of your psychosis where like you didn't want to go back to your childhood? It didn't have anything to do with that, you think, on some kind of level, or you just hated all the questions about it?
Well, like I said before, I knew what type of baseball player he was.
Right.
And I didn't want to be compared to him because, in a way, I felt like I might not be able to fulfill the shoes of this name.
Right.
But also in my thought process was that I want to make a name for myself. So instead of calling me Willie Mays Aikens, just call me Willie Aikens.
Gotcha. And do you prefer that today, that people call you Willie Aikens? Or?
It doesn't. It doesn't make any difference. You know, I'm no longer a professional baseball player, but there isn't any shame in being called that or being thought that I was named after one of the greatest baseball players, of all time.
Yeah, of all time, no doubt. So
exactly.
Okay, so going back now, I know you had a starting problem as a kid. You always felt like you were the biggest kid. The kids used to call you Fatso. They were relentless on you, from what I read about your past. This is just another way of escaping is playing ball, right? So in high school, you meet a McNeil, I believe, or Willie McNeil?
Exactly.
Who was Willie McNeil, and how did he change your life at that time?
Well, I met Coach McNeil. He lived about 5 or 6 miles from where I lived. We had these little small neighborhoods in Seneca. My neighborhood was called Bruce Hill.
Yes.
Coach McNeil, he lived in Scotland, which was about 4 or 5 miles from where I lived at.
Okay.
But Coach McNeil in the black neighborhood was the coach for baseball. He was the coach for football. He was the coach for basketball. And, he just at an early age, he took me under his wings. And he told me something that, I'll never forget, that he felt like I was special, especially as a baseball player.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that, hey, if you keep playing and keep improving, you have a chance to get a scholarship to college or whatever. But as it turned out, I got a football scholarship instead of a baseball scholarship.
Because of your size.
Coach McNeil was like a father figure to me.
Right. So, and according to what you told me and Google Maps, I just looked at, you're right, Clemson University isn't that far from Seneca or Bruce Hill at all. Surely Clemson is recruiting you to play for baseball for them, correct?
I'll tell you a story. After I signed and became a professional baseball player, during the off season, I used to go down to Clemson and work out. And Coach Wilhelm, who was the baseball coach, he came up to me one day and he started talking to me. He said, Willie, how in the world can you be 4 or 5 miles from Clemson, South Carolina, and we didn't sign you as a baseball player? And, I just came out and I told Coach Wilhelm what I thought happened. Back then, Clemson didn't recruit. Back in the 60s and 70s, Clemson didn't recruit black baseball players. So I was never recruited to go to that school over there.
Right. So you wind up going to South Carolina State, and what
in Orangeburg.
Right, in Orangeburg. And it's a historical accredited black college. What attracts you to go there? Are they the only ones that give you an offer?
Yep, that was basically the only school that offered me a scholarship. I was poor, so I couldn't afford to pay tuition or anything like that. But they offered me a football scholarship, and once I got down there, I told them that baseball was my favorite sport, and I wanted to play baseball too, so I did.
Right, and South Carolina State at that time, it had a very rich baseball tradition. I think while you played, Gene Richards was even there at the time when you were there. But they would eventually drop their program. That was your freshman year, right?
It was.
And that made you eligible to become a free agent? Is that how that worked?
It made me eligible.
Not a free agent, but you could be drafted.
The baseball draft.
Right.
Back then they had 2 drafts. They had one in January and they had one in June.
Okay.
And back then, if you was going to a 4-year school, you couldn't come out like the players can now. You had to finish your 4 years of education before you could come out and become a professional baseball player. But during my freshman year, we was playing up in Washington D.C. Against Morgan State. I ended up hitting 2 home runs during that game, and after the game, a little short, fat guy. His name was Walter Yaus. He walked up to me and asked me if I would be interested in playing in an amateur league during that summer. Long story short, I eventually told him, yeah, I wanted to play. I drove my 1961 Chevy from South Carolina to Baltimore. It took me 13 hours.
Yeah, I've done that drive.
Yep, I played up there during the summer.
Right.
So while I was playing up there during the summer, this is during that time when they was trying to add programs for females in colleges. And some of the schools in the MEAC could afford to do it, and some of them couldn't.
Title IX.
So exactly. So they got together and decided on a sport to drop if they couldn't afford to add programs for female and keep all their programs. They decided on baseball.
How'd you like playing baseball in Baltimore?
I loved it.
Right.
I mean, I was doing something that I loved. I got a chance to go to Walter was a scout for at the time, I didn't know he was a scout for the Baltimore Orioles.
Exactly.
So he used to take me over to the practices, and I used to catch BP for them.
So let's get this straight. Walter Yals is actually in with the Orioles. The Orioles are probably looking at you like, this is somebody we're going to probably take in the draft coming up. Did you have a feeling that the Orioles were kind of hot on you?
Well, I only thought that I would get drafted by the Orioles because Walter knew about me.
Exactly.
And I came one day I was hitting batting practice, and I came 3 or 4 rows from hitting one out of the stadium. And all the players told me that had only been done one time by Frank.
Frank
Robinson.
66.
So after South Carolina State dropped baseball, I go to Walter, and I asked Walter. I said, Walter, what do you think I should do? Because I don't want to go back and play football. Baseball is my sport. He said, Willie, why don't you go back and talk to your football coaches and tell them that you have a chance to be drafted in the January draft, and ask them if you can sit out and not play football. And that's what I did. And Walter said, after your first semester of the sophomore year, drop out of school. I'm pretty sure you're going to be drafted by a major league team. And that's what I did. And
so doesn't Walter Yals get in some kind of disagreement with the Orioles and break ties with them at some point here?
The baseball draft was January 5th. And I'm sitting at home watching the draft. And the San Diego Padres have the first pick. And they picked my teammate, Gene Richards.
Right.
The California Angels have the second pick, and they picked me.
How shocked are you going number 2 overall? Kid from Seneca. How shocked are you?
I know. So about 10 minutes later, the telephone rang, and it's Walter. He said, Willie, I got you. I said, what? I thought you was a scout for the Orioles. He said, I quit the Orioles 2 weeks ago.
You see that?
And signed with the Angels.
My goodness. Well, you would have probably been stuck behind Eddie Murray, so it probably worked out best for you.
Yeah, I think so.
So soon after you're drafted, you cement yourself as one of the more prolific sluggers in the Angels organization. And I like to ask former players this question. You're in the minor leagues. You're doing the backwood towns, crappy hotels, bus rides. Did you like the minor league experience? And who in the minor leagues brought you along, was trying to teach you how to become a pro?
Well, playing in the minor leagues was a process that you had to go through in order to get to the big leagues. And my first year in A-ball, I led the league in the RBIs, a category. And my coach was Bobby Knopp. And I really give him credit for taking me under his wings. And he used to always tell me things that I never forgot. Play hard, or you have the ability as a hitter to make it to the major leagues. You need to work on your defense. You need to keep your weight down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So he's the one for me that stick out. Back when I played, you only had the manager.
That's so funny you say that, because I was talking to Ron Robinson last week. He used to play for the Reds, and he said the very same exact thing. You didn't have bench coaches. You didn't have bullpen coaches. You had roving instructors and a manager. And he said sometimes the players would kind of take advantage of the manager because it would be more players than manager. Did you find that to be true?
We had a pitching coach that was a rover, and we had a hitting coach that was a rover.
Gotcha.
Those were the only two people that were a part of the team. The third base coach was the manager. The first base coach was the player. You didn't have no extra work. The only time we had extra hitting or extra work was a day off.
Gotcha.
I've been coaching for the Kansas City Royals for the past 9 years, and every day we have early hitting. Every day we have defensive work, early defense. I tell the players today that back when I played, we didn't have that kind of stuff. And yeah, there were situations probably that some of the players took advantage of the manager because he was the only one that was running the team.
Right. That's so interesting. So,
Yep.
1977, you're ripping it up in El Paso, Texas. You get a couple call-ups that year. You go up and down. You get some pinch hit duties, some DH duties, no regular ABs, and you're not very productive. So you go back down. But 79, you finally get your opportunity. Rod Carew goes down with a thumb injury. That opens the slot up for you at first base with the California Angels. And look, that 1979 Angels team was a very good team. I remember it very well because my Orioles played them in the playoffs that year. And
they beat us.
Yeah, we did beat you. There has to be internal pressure and expectations on you at 24 years old to produce on a team of that caliber.
Well, in 1977, I wasn't in AA. I was in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay.
My first year of 75, I was in Des Moines, Iowa, Davenport, Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
My second year, 76, I played in El Paso, Texas.
Okay. And that was the year you were talking about earlier. Okay.
1977, I started the year in Salt Lake City, and after 2 months, the California Angels they called me up to the big leagues. And I was in the big leagues in 1977 for part of the season. And they ended up sending me back down because I wasn't playing.
Right. Which sometimes that's the best thing to do for a young kid. Do you think
it was?
Right.
Like today, if they call a young kid up in a position like I was in back in 1977, they don't put him on the bench. They put him out in the field to see
what he can do.
Exactly.
Yeah. It has become more sinkers. Yeah.
1978, I spent the whole year in AAA. Like you said, in 1979, I made the team out of spring training. And the California Angels had just signed a 7-time American League batting champ.
Right.
Rob Carew.
Right.
He played for the Twins at second base.
Yep.
He signed as a free agent with the Angels, and they moved him from second base to first base.
Right.
So now I got Rob Carew playing in
front of you.
And for the first month and a half of the baseball season, I'm on the bench. I don't get a chance to play. But like you said before, Rod, he broke his hand.
Right.
So Grossy called me inside of his office and he said, "Willie, are you ready to play?" I said, "I am." And for the next 2 months, I played first base and I did my thing.
You did do your thing. And does Carew give you any advice? Does he pull you aside and say, "Look, youngin"?
Well, I was a rookie.
Right.
So, by this time, Rod Carew was in his 30s. So, I always watched him.
Right. And you also had Baylor on that team. You had Grits, Campaneris. You had a couple older...
All those guys were veterans. I was the only rookie that became a starter in 1977.
Yep.
All those other guys, they had years of experience playing in the big league. So, of course, I always talked to them. They always gave me advice.
And what'd you think about that taste of playoffs in '79? How'd that satisfy you? Did you like that?
Well, of course I did. I was a part of the team.
You were? Yeah, absolutely.
September 18th, playing against the Kansas City Royals, I hit a double down the right field line. And I slid into second base, and I tore up my knee. So I don't know if you know about that or not, but I ended up having surgery.
Right.
So I didn't get a chance to play in the playoffs against the Orioles.
Oh, you did not? I did not know that.
Yep, and a lot of people have said that if I hadn't got hurt,
you might have been the difference.
Exactly.
Yeah, it makes sense because actually, after the '79 season, you moved to Kansas City, and Kansas City is a team that's, well, they've gone to the playoffs and they've lost to the Yankees in '77, '78. 76, right? So they've lost 3 in a row to the Yankees, but you go there and you probably are the piece that changes everything. You're hitting behind George Brett. Besides him, I think you're the only guy with 20 home runs and 90-some RBIs. You're second in both of those categories. And so when you go to Kansas City, how does that feel when you move on to Kansas City, another successful team?
I was a little upset at first that I got traded, but I knew I wasn't going to get a chance to play with the Angels.
Exactly.
After I got traded to the Royals, Mr. Jerry Sherhost called me up and said, Willie, you are going to get a chance to play at first base every day.
Right. They had a need.
At that period of time, I had just come off a major knee surgery.
Right.
And I go to spring training, and I was on about 85. On a piece of turf in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. So the first half of 1980, I struggled. I mean, the fans in Kansas City, they booed me out of the ballpark. But once again, I'm going to a good team.
Right.
I mean, the California Angels beat the Royals out in 1979.
Yes.
We won by like 3.5 games. But like you said before, 76, 77, and 78,
right.
The Royals was in the playoffs. And they lost to the Yankees.
Yeah.
So we had veteran guys, Hal McRae, Amos Otis, George Brett was on that team.
Mm-hmm. Great team.
The team.
Yep.
And that was the year that George hit a 390.
That was a hell of a season, man. He was on fire that year. God. And you have to, I guess you have to take some solace in the fact that you were the guy hitting behind him. I mean, you had to have something to do with that.
Well, then, no player is going to go out and hit a 390 swinging at balls out the strike zone.
Right.
So George was getting pitches to hit. And I'm not trying to brag about anything, but he was getting pitches to hit because when they walked him,
yes.
I used to hurt. You know, I came 2 runs from driving in 100 runs.
That's amazing. I mean, you really were a slugger. So, look, 1979, just going back again, you're with the Angels, you're playing the Twins, you're in a motel in Minnesota. A teammate pulls you into the hotel room. What's going on in that hotel room?
A couple of teammates, you know, I'm just walking down the hallway, and they asked me to come inside, and they got some white stuff on the table, and they asked me if I want a couple lines or whatever, and what is it? It's cocaine. So I decided to snort a couple lines, didn't think anything about it, and I just took off.
And you say, I think I read that you said you really didn't feel much that first time, and you didn't really think much about it, right?
I didn't.
And in fact, you said that you didn't even do it again until a year later when you were in Kansas City. Is that correct?
I think so. And when I got to Kansas City, you know, it was some guys on that team that partied.
Right.
So I became a part of the party scene.
Mm-hmm.
I probably shouldn't have, but that's just the way it was back then. I made a choice to drink. I made a choice to chase the girls.
Right.
I made a choice to start snorting cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
And in 81, it was a player that got traded from another team to the Kansas City Royals. And he came up to me one day out of the outfield and asked me if I would, if I like to get high. And I said, "Oh, for what?" He said, "Cocaine."
Is this 1980?
81.
Okay. So this is after the World Series.
Exactly. But by this time, I was snorting cocaine because in 1980, I snorted cocaine every game of the World Series.
And it's so amazing when you say that because, I mean, you were phenomenal. I mean, you were like David Ortiz in that World Series. You were clutch. You were the first player to hit multiple home runs in 2 World Series games, Game 1 and Game 4, I believe, right? You had the game-winning RBI hit in Game 3. I mean, you were out of your mind, and quite honestly, had the Royals won that World World Series, you surely would have been on that list of MVPs there. But you're telling me the whole time in the World Series, you're getting high during the series.
Exactly, but it was a controlled high. You know, I had a homeboy that lived in Michigan, and he flew up to Philadelphia, and he came to the World Series, and he had some coats. Once we came to Kansas City, you know, I had my connections and everything in Kansas City, but a bunch of my homeboys from Seneca, including my mom, you know, they came to the World Series in Kansas City. But at that period of time in my life, you know, I drank a little bit, I snorted a little bit of cocaine, so
right.
It didn't really affect on the baseball field.
So you feel like you were you are an addict at this time, right? I mean, you're definitely like you're definitely got addictive personalities. You have an addictive personality with the women, with the cocaine. You're in denial about it, but you are an addict at this point, right?
I don't think I was an addict at that point. No.
No. It's more just it's still like a very social thing. You're hanging out with the guys.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that addiction, like you said, it begins to show up in other phases of your life, most notably women, right?
Yeah, and you know, after I was introduced to this guy in 1981 by one of my teammates, we started going over to his house consistently. And he started following us on the road trips. And when he was on the road trips, he would bring the drink. So 1981, I started to do more and more of the drug.
Okay.
And we had like 6 players on our team at that time that was doing cocaine.
Right.
And you know, back in the early 80s, mid 80s or whatever, cocaine was being done all over the league, man.
Yeah. Oh, look at the Pittsburgh drug trials, right? I mean, it was rampant. I'm gonna tell you something. I've never said this on an open mic before. You know, I'm almost 50 years old. I went through the 80s. I went through the 90s. I had a very bad cocaine addiction, a very bad drinking addiction. I know exactly what you're talking about. I knew the seedy environment, and I know how in the beginning it just starts out as fun. The women, the coke. I know how it all goes. This is a judgment-free zone right here, Willie. I've been there, brother. I know, believe me. So, and I'm not sure if you've ever seen the Doc Ellis documentary where he claims he never pitched a game in his life without being high, including a no-hitter.
Exactly.
Did that start to happen to you in Kansas City? Every game you were high?
No, I wasn't high during the game.
Okay.
I never did drugs on the day of the game. I never did at the ballpark.
Right.
It was always the night before. But the drugs were still in my system. In 1983, when everything went down with myself and then 3 of my teammates, I probably did the most drugs of
your life.
Yeah, in 1983.
Okay.
But I also had my best year in the big leagues. I hit over 300. I had the most on home runs ever in the big leagues. You know, it's unfortunate what happened with us, but you know that's one of the consequences of doing something that's illegal. And
does your addiction in your brain tell you, hey, this isn't bad. Look at the numbers I'm putting up. I can still produce and I can still do this. Is anybody pulling you aside at this point and saying anything to you?
Well, you know, we had one day we had a couple of FBI agents.
Right.
They came to the clubhouse and they spoke to us about gambling and drugs and stuff. During their meeting, they ended up naming 3 or 4 of the guys that was going over to this guy's house in Kansas. After the meeting, I go up to one of my teammates and I asked him if he heard what they just said, and he said no. He said, Willie, you are just paranoid. So one of the players that tried to give me advice or steer me away from what I was doing was Hal McCray.
Right.
He was the one that I talked to her, and he said, Willie, if you're doing anything you shouldn't be doing, you need to stop doing what you're doing because they know what you're doing.
So, and the ironic thing is, they do know what you're doing. They've already got you probed. They're watching this house where you go and have fun. You, Willie Wilson, Jerry Martin, this little hangout spot, and they name you guys by names inside the dugout, don't they?
And I think it was their way of trying to warn us.
Yeah, it definitely was. It definitely was a way of trying to warn you to get yourself together.
Yep, and if I had stopped doing Spirit in Time, I would have never talked in that case. None of us would have.
And I guess so. U.S. Attorney Jim Marquez, he conducts a cocaine probe, and that probe was conducted by, I guess, the surveillance they did on you guys at this house, right?
Yeah.
And what was the result of this probe?
Well, what happened was that they had us on a wiretap. They had put a wiretap on this guy's house.
Mm-hmm.
It was during a period of 2 weeks when he didn't have any drugs. And during that period of 2 weeks, I called him 7 times, which was every other day, asking him if he had any drugs. And in Kansas, they have a law that says whatever you say over the telephone can be used against you in a court of law.
Right.
And it's a felony.
Yep.
So they had all of us on the wiretap. We called the Players Association and asked them what would happen to a player that got charged with a felony. And they said, well, convicted him of that as a felon. They said he probably wouldn't play in the big leagues again. So our lawyers was able to work out a plea deal.
Right.
And we pled guilty to a misdemeanor.
Possession.
Attempting to procure cocaine over the telephone.
Okay.
And at our sentencing, the judge, he made an example of us.
You guys became the first baseball players to ever be arrested for drugs, correct?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And so you're spending this time in jail. I mean, what was jail like? Was it a slap on the wrist? I've heard you say you're having sex with women in this jail. What was that?
We went to a place in Fort Worth, Texas, and it was a co-ed place.
Right.
And I used to walk around with this girl on holding her hand on the compound, and we eventually had sex while we was incarcerated.
Okay.
I was there when I got sentenced. I was in a rehab program up in Baltimore, Maryland, at this place called Shepherd and Pratt.
I know exactly where it's at.
So I asked you, and I only went there because I wanted the jurors to see that, that I was in a rehab place and hoping that he would have compassion on me, not sentence me to prison or whatever, but I ended up going back and finishing up the program.
Right.
Whereas we was given the date to report to prison on January 5th, I think. All of the other 3 guys reported on the date. I didn't end up reporting until February.
Oh, okay.
So I reported like a month later than everybody else because I wanted to go back and finish the program. And whether that was a good, thing or not, but I ended up missing all the spring training.
Right.
But what happened, Major League Baseball came in and suspended all of us for a year.
Right.
After we got sentenced to prison. We appealed it to an arbitrator, and the arbitrator ruled it down to 45 days. So we got suspended for the first 45 days of the baseball season. I wasn't able to come back and play until May 15th.
And by this time, you've been traded to the Blue Jays, correct?
I got traded during the off season when I was at the rehabilitation place.
Okay. And you spent 2 lackluster years by your standards there. What went wrong? You're only 30 years old. Is it the drugs catching up with you?
I wasn't doing drugs at the time. I was sober.
Rehabbing. Okay, I gotcha.
But a couple things changed. When I went to the Blue Jays, I became a platoon player.
Gotcha.
I was only playing against right-handers. I also became a designated hitter. I wasn't playing first base anymore.
Yeah.
I had missed all of spring training. So, as a hitter, I'm a month and a half behind everybody else. And hitting-wise is the hardest thing to do in a spring training, because the pitchers are always ahead of the hitters.
Right.
When you report to spring training.
So if you're late, you're really late.
Exactly. And because I was a part-time player, I wasn't able to catch up to the pitching.
Well, you hit in your final major league at bat, you hit a home run. As you're rounding the bases, do you think in the back of your head this is your last home run?
Of course not.
Right. I mean, it's weird because, and I ask guys this a lot, because one of my favorite quotes in Moneyball is when the Mets scout says to Billy Beane, he says, baseball always tells you when it's over. And sometimes it's 2 years from now, sometimes it's 20 years from now, but the game will always tell you. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but I don't really feel like baseball really told you that it was over.
No, it didn't. And when the general manager came to my hotel room after the game and told me the news that I was getting released, I couldn't believe it.
Right. You pissed off?
I was, and it was just the first month of the baseball season.
Right.
I wasn't really given a chance to go out and show them that a full baseball season that I was capable of doing a good job. But I kind of somewhat saw the hand written on the wall because they went out and traded for Lynn Matuzak during the off season.
Okay.
And he was basically the same type of player or hitter that I. So he ended up taking my spot as the right-handed designated hitter.
And you float around the Mets and Jays before heading off to Mexico, where you pretty much dominated that Mexican Pacific Coast League for 6 years. I mean, you absolutely abused their pitching. What is it like sitting in Mexico, knowing you're one of the best hitters on the planet, and knowing that you're never going to get back into the major leagues again? Do you still enjoy baseball at this point? Or
I did.
Is there bitterness?
That was the reason why I kept playing, because I felt I could play. The Pacific Coast League is in the Winter League. The Mexican League is during the summer. And that's where I played at my first few years in Puebla.
Okay.
I went down there and I broke the high back. 454. I hit 46 home runs and drove in the field.
Just absolutely killing them.
Nobody in the United States would give me a chance. I mean, I went to Tidewater for like a week.
Right. Do you have any offers for Japan?
I did. After my first year in the PCL, playing for Mazatlan. While I was playing, the Japanese sent a representative to Mexico, and I negotiated the contract to go over there and play for $300,000. I was making $4,000 a month in Mexico.
Right.
My highest salary in the big league was $600,000. So it offered me $300,000.
Right.
I was going over there and make half of what my high salary. I was thrilled to death, man. Excited. Yeah,
I got to tell you, I think the Japanese would have ate you up over there. You probably would have wound up with another contract much better than that one.
Oh, I went over there and hit 50 home runs or more.
No doubt. And they love those kind of players over there. They love them.
We went over there after the World Series in 1981. We played 17 exhibition games. I had 7 home runs in 17 exhibition games.
Damn, Billy.
The Japanese told me at that time, they said, when you finish your baseball career in the United States, we want you to come over here and play.
I believe that. I do believe that. I think you would have been a perfect fit for Japanese baseball.
So now I'm getting a chance to go over there and play. But guess what? When I tried to get a working visa to go over there and play, I couldn't get one because I had a...
Oh, are you serious?
The criminal record.
Oh, my God. So, it's costing you money on all ends.
That cost me millions, man. I mean, millions and millions of dollars.
And
I hit 50, 60 home runs. My next year's salary is going to be it's going to jump up to $1 million at least.
Right.
I never got a chance to go over there and play.
Unbelievable. So you're sitting in Mexico. You know you're being blackballed. You know you're not getting back in the league. The addiction's kicking in now, right?
Well, what happened was in 1987, my second year in Mexico, I got sick.
Okay.
With
Hepatitis.
Yeah.
From the women?
I was only down there for about a month, so I got weak. I couldn't play.
Right.
So I ended up coming back home to Kansas City. And at this point in time, I hadn't had any drugs since 1983.
Okay.
I had been clean and sober for about 3.5 years.
No alcohol?
Nothing.
Okay.
I was clean and sober, period. So I come back to Kansas City, and I start back drinking. You know, I had made up my mind, you know, I can't go over to Japan and play. Nobody's going to give me a chance in the big leagues.
Right.
So if I want to have a drink once in a while, I have a drink. So I started back drinking, and my drinking led me back to my drug of choice, which was cocaine.
Right. And then that's how it works. Your addiction tells you it's okay if you have a drink or two, and next thing you know, man, you're back off to the races. So the Pittsburgh drug trials of 1985 go down. You along with other major leaguers, you're called before a grand jury in Pittsburgh to give your testimony. I guess this is an agreement so that you get no punishment or anything against you.
No, I never was called to a Pittsburgh.
Oh, you never were, but your name was brought up. Is that how that worked?
I'm not sure. You know, we were indicted and went to prison before all that stuff happened in Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
You know that, right?
Yeah. So, you were definitely in. I thought your name was in the records. When I was looking in the records, your name was one of the names mentioned. But they said they had suspended you. I mean, like, when you think about, we were talking earlier how everyone in the 80s was doing it, and it really blows your mind away when you look at the names in the drug trials. I mean, poor Alan Wiggins, you know? I mean, you know, a guy like Larry Sorensen who's in jail and Alan Wiggins dies. I mean, it was really rampant during those days.
Look how many times the pitcher for the Dodgers was.
How? Right.
How?
Yeah.
I mean, at least 3 or 4 times, man.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So,
all those guys are pirates. Lacey,
yeah, Lee Lacey, yeah.
All those guys.
Dave Parker, Keith Hernandez. Some of those guys, I guess, did survive those drug trials, but I think, and tell me what you think about this, I actually think that Dave Parker and Keith Hernandez are probably Hall of Fame players, but they don't get that because of the drug trials. Do you think there's any validity to that thought?
I don't think any of those guys are not in the Hall of Fame because of their involvement.
You don't.
With drugs. Cocaine. Some other guys are not in the Hall of Fame because of their involvement with steroids.
Right. That's no question.
Exactly.
But you don't think no one's... I mean, Tim Raines did make the team, and he's specifically mentioned in the drug trials. But I don't know. I just always felt like Parker and Hernandez always had that kind of stink on them, and I don't know. Maybe you're right.
Yeah.
So let's dig into the meat on these bones. December 1993, you meet Ginger Locke. Who is Ginger Locke? Tell us the story.
She just somebody that showed up at my house one day asking me for a street, asking me if I could help her find the street. I took her to the street. Instead of her going to the street, she kept following me. I pulled into a gas station. I ended up talking to her, and I ended up, giving her my telephone number and stuff like that. And eventually, she ended up calling me. Well, what happened was that she called me up, and then I tried to call her back.
Right.
She never answered the phone.
Mm-hmm.
She finally called me back. She made up the story about how she had to go to St. Louis to get her car back. I said, well, what happened to your car? She said, I loaned it to a friend, and the friend got stopped by the cops, and drugs were found inside of the car, which was just a conversation, a lie.
Right.
It's the drugs in there.
Mm-hmm.
I asked her, I said, well, do you get high? She said, my girlfriends and me sit around on the weekend and play cards, and we get high. She said, I've been trying to find somebody that could give me some good cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
And I just came out and volunteered right then and there and said, well, look, I know somebody. If you want me to get you some, I can.
Right.
So, make a long story short, I ended up getting drugs for this girl 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
And after the 4th time, they had 50 grams or more. They kicked my door in and arrested me and said, Mr. Aikens, you sold drugs to an undercover officer.
Well, in fact, you bought her cocaine, if I'm correct about this, correct me if I'm wrong, you bought the woman cocaine 3 times, crack cocaine 3 times, then you wound up going back and buying, I guess, an 8-ball with that last run there, but it was in powder form when you got it.
Well, each time I got drugs for her, except for the first 2 times, every time it was powder cocaine.
Oh, okay.
I ended up cooking it up right here in my house for her.
Right.
But the last time I get an ounce, it was an ounce of powder cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring it to her in the car, and she wanted me to go back and trade it to get an ounce of crack cocaine.
Gotcha.
Because I think they felt like they was going to have a problem with the transaction part, because each time it was powder cocaine, and I converted the powder to crack cocaine, and they wanted crack because crack carried a stiffer penalty.
Exactly, which is ludicrous to even think about it. I mean, on so many levels, there's a lot of racial implications. There's a lot of class, implications. I mean, it's such a ridiculous law that used to be in effect.
Well, that's like making a law that says water is 100 times more potent or dangerous than ice.
Right. Pretty much. Exactly. It's the same exact argument. So
if you don't have powder cocaine, you can't get rock or crack cocaine.
And here's the thing. Ginger Locke, she plays it off like you're this big-time drug dealer, when really you're just an addict who's probably stealing a little bit of her cocaine from her that she doesn't know about, and you're probably trying to have sex with this woman, right? I mean, that's probably what the deal is here, right? You probably figure if I get her coke a couple times, maybe she'll have sex with me.
That's what I did, man.
Exactly.
I smoked cocaine, and I screwed the girls.
And so you get arrested for this. Charges are filed. Now, I gotta be honest with you. As by this time, I'm a 22-year-old. I believe you were arrested in '93, correct?
Exactly.
So I'm a 22-year-old kid now. I'm 12 years older than what I remember you as. And I was just so disappointed when I saw you come out. You were in horrible shape. You looked like you'd been through wars. Did you really realize how far you had fallen at that moment, or was the disease in your head telling you, man, you're Willie Aikens, you're still great?
I had no idea that I was just destroying myself.
Right.
I had cleaned out 2 bank accounts of over $100,000. smoking cocaine every day. I'm hanging out with criminals at my house. I was in a situation whereas, I was having a great time, or at least I thought I was.
Right. Oh, there is that part of the ride where you're having a great time, because then you start chasing that great time, and those great, it's hard to keep up that chase.
Yeah, and eventually, the end is always this institution, jail, or death.
Yes.
I was one of the fortunate ones. I went to jail, but I truly believe if I'm not taken or forced out of this situation, I probably would have and ended up killing myself.
Yeah, it could have ended up a lot worse. So the jury finds you guilty. You're sentenced to 20 years for distribution of crack cocaine within 1,000 feet of a school. You had a firearm present during your arrest, so they got you for that too.
Which was falsified evidence. I never had a weapon.
Oh, really?
No, I never had a weapon on any of those occasions. Listen to this. When they kicked my house in, they found a 12-gauge shotgun.
Okay.
They kicked my house in on a Monday. I got that 12-gauge shotgun on that Friday. So I had that gun for like 2 days.
Willie, you have the worst luck, brother.
Undercover officer, when they found that gun, that undercover officer went back and filed a secondary report, man, and made up a story about a gun.
Right.
She said on January 28th, which was a month before I got the gun, or January 3rd, she said she came to my house and I had a rifle-like weapon sitting on the arm of my sofa. She asked me if I was a hunter. And I said no, that I had the gun to protect my drugs.
Right.
That conversation, it never took place.
Right.
During my trial, my lawyer questioned her about that. He said, "Did you make out a report each time you left Mr. Aikens' house?" She said, "Yes, I did." He said, "Are your reports important?" She said, "Yes, they are." He said, she said, "That's right." He said, "Look at your report. Does it say anything in your reports about you seeing a gun at Mr. Aikens' house?" She said, "No." He said, "Why not?" She said, "I forgot about it."
Right. She forgot.
How many police officers on a drug sting?
They forget nothing.
He's going to see a gun and then go back and make a report out and not put it in her report. That's not going to happen, because when they kick my door in, they want to know if any guns are inside the house or not.
Sounds like a lot of horse crap to me, Willie. Honestly, on that gun, man. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yep.
So you're locked up. Reality's setting in. I mean, how's that working out, man? I know you developed this spiritual kind of realization behind bars. How does that work? How does the whole? This is serious prison now. This isn't some slap on the wrist.
I always felt like I was going to win my case on appeal. Mainly because of the entitlement thing as a baseball player. Every time something happened to me, I got off, man. So I truly felt like I was going to get off. After being incarcerated for 2 years, nothing had happened in my case.
Right.
I rededicated my life to Christ, man. And I did it trying to trick God. Saying that, rededicate my life, hoping that God would help me get my sentence reduced.
Right.
And all that kind of stuff. You can't trick God.
Nope. You cannot.
He knew what I was doing. But when I rededicated my life to Christ, I was smoking. I stopped smoking. I immediately, when I was arrested, no drugs. I eventually stopped doing tobacco. Started going to church. Started reading my Bible. 3 or 4 years would pass and I would lose an appeal. 3 or 4 years would pass and I would lose an appeal. 3 or 4 years would pass, and I was moved in the field.
And
I was incarcerated for 10 years, man.
And I want the audience to understand what we're talking about here. The same amount of crack cocaine that you were busted for, had that been powder, that would have been like a 2.5-year sentence, correct?
Exactly.
The fact that it was crack gave you all these additional years.
I got 15 and a half on the drugs. Well, basically, I got the top of the guideline. 12 and a half on the drugs. Got a 2-level enhancement for obstruction of justice, which made it 15 and a half. And then I got 5 on a gun, which made it 20 years and 8 months.
You're listening to the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network. I'm sitting down at a one-on-one interview with former Major League Baseball star Willie Aikens on Backwards K. Now, Willie, I gotta be honest with you. I'm very disappointed that none of your MLB brothers kind of stepped up for you when you were behind bars. There were 2 people that really looked out for you as far as your fraternity is concerned. The first one was Cal Ripken Jr. How did you develop a relationship with Cal, and what did he do for you while you were behind bars?
Well, I played against Cal. And we had the same baseball agent.
Yep, Ron Shapiro.
Ron Shapiro. So all that time I was incarcerated, I stayed in contact with Ron. And through Ron, I found out that Cal Ripken was friends with George H.W. Bush.
Oh, okay.
And his son was the president.
Yes.
8 years while I was incarcerated.
Okay.
And I wanted to file a petition for clemency, get my sentence commuted with the President of the United States. So Cal ended up writing a letter to George H. Bush.
Okay, he wrote a handwritten letter to George Bush on your behalf, Cal Ripken Jr.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And he denied me twice.
Okay.
While I was in prison. So Cal was basically the only player that really, reached out to me and tried to help me or anything like that.
Well, the other one was Hal McRae. Hal McRae has always been a brother to you, correct?
Exactly.
And tell me what Hal McRae meant to you when you were behind bars.
Well, not much at that period of time because Hal, he had his life to live.
Okay.
It wasn't really anything that Hal could do. What Hal did after I got out of prison, I talked to Hal, and he put me in contact with a person here in Kansas City that owned a construction company while I was at the halfway house.
Right. That's awesome.
Yep. And this person ended up giving me a job, making $25 an hour.
That's not a bad job to get out to. I mean, $25 an hour jobs, they're not very easy to come by these days.
But another person that I stayed in contact with was the last general manager that I played for.
Okay.
Toronto Blue Jays. His name is Pat A. Gillett.
Pat Gillett, sure.
I put Mr. Gillett on my visitor list.
Really?
And each time the Philadelphia Phillies came into Atlanta, Georgia, to play the Atlanta Braves.
Are you serious?
Mr. Pat Gillett would come to the USP Atlanta prison and visit me, man.
Wow. Unbelievable.
This was the guy that released me from baseball.
Right.
But this was basically the only one outside of my agent that was still in the baseball that came to see me while I was incarcerated.
Now, I would think that your Hall of Fame teammate, George Brett, and I know he went on to hire you, him and Drayton Moore, down the road, but I was really hurt that he really just kind of ignored you while you were in there. He didn't, he didn't even give much thought to your letters. I mean, how are you feeling about that at that time?
I didn't think anything of it. I was kind of hoping that those guys was write back or reach out to me.
Right.
I couldn't blame them for not doing that because I had put my own self in that situation.
I understand that.
So, I wasn't angry at them. I didn't have any kind of animosity towards those guys or anything because they had their life to live just like I had my life to live incarcerated.
Sure. And you were scheduled to be released in 2012. You're finally released in 2008 after Congress approved new guidelines in the federal drug laws. In fact, you testified before Congress, did you not?
After I got out of prison, I did.
And what was that all about? What did you say? How did that shake out?
Well, I saw a lot of the injustice.
Willie, hold up before you get started. First of all, before we even start on this question, can you even imagine Willie Mays Aikens, the kid from Bruce Hill, Seneca, South Carolina, is getting ready to speak before the United States Congress? Can you believe that? The stuttering kid, all the things that were against you, you lifted yourself up from poverty, the drug abuse. I mean, can you believe you're in Congress talking before the United States legislative branch?
I tell you what, while I was incarcerated, something happened to my speech, man. And, I used to get up in church and share my testimony and everything, but, when God, he want to use you.
Right.
Just like Moses of the Bible, Moses had a speech impediment too. But God asked Moses. He said, "Who make your mouth? Who make your ears? Who make your eyes?" But if God, he want to use you, but then he can make you whole.
That's beautiful.
So, I lost my stuttering, and not all of it. Even today, I still stutter, but I don't stutter in a kind of way like I used to in the past.
Right. Because
I left behind a whole lot of guys in prison that had a whole lot of years just on those drug charges. I wasn't the only one, man.
Yeah.
My case was bad.
And those cases never did get, grandfathered in, did they? I mean, people...
No.
Right, so you got out, but other dudes who got the same charges were sitting there
Exactly.
What the hell? That's awful.
And I just received an email from one of the guys. 1995, I was at Leavenworth Prison. And this guy named Terrence A. Davis was my roommate. And I received an email from him about a month ago. He's in Springfield right now. This is 1995, man. I'm talking about 25 years ago.
Right.
And this poor kid is still in prison on a drug charge, man.
That is just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
He told me he had 3 years ago, and he'll be getting out of prison.
So what do you say when you go to Congress? What's your big testimony there?
Well, I basically testified about the situation of incarceration for people that have been sentenced on crack cocaine. And if you had a life sentence in the federal system, your release date said deceased. There was no parole in the federal system. So I testified about that they should focus more on correction, rehabilitation, stuff like that. And to make a long story short, a year later, that ratio of 100 to 1 was reduced to 18 to 1. They called me back to Washington, D.C. and gave me a plaque and a award.
Unbelievable.
And they said, Mr. Aikens, we feel like that because of your testimony, this is the reason why that ratio of crack to powder cocaine was reduced. And, that was a promise I made to some of those guys that I left behind. I don't know if it became retroactive and it affected anybody that was still incarcerated.
Right.
But I feel like I had done a good deed for the ones that was just coming in or that hadn't been a sentence yet.
And see, to me, that's the story right there. That's the arc. I mean, you would have thought that you would have made your mark in baseball. That's how you would, make your true mark in this world. You'd be one of the great sluggers of all time. But instead, you make your mark in, a social kind of category here. Something that, can benefit others. Look, man, people who have an addiction to cocaine do not ask to be junkies. It's an awful experience to be a junkie. People can't even imagine what it's like to be a junkie. No one chooses this. It's a disease. I think a lot of people have a really closed-minded view and don't understand that about that. People who've, never been in that situation, have never had an addiction problem, I guess. But
it's no different than having an addiction to alcohol.
Cigarettes.
But alcohol is the worst drug that we have in our society.
Without question.
It affects every vital organ inside of our body. But you can walk inside of a liquor store and buy it. And go out and drive a car and kill somebody.
Right.
But the cocaine thing, you can sit at your house and snort cocaine, and then you can get set up by an undercover police officer on a drug scene and be sentenced to 20 years in prison.
Right. Well, in 2008, you personally apologized to the Royal fans and the people of Kansas City and the Kansas City Star. I read the post. I got to say, what an amazing thing to do. I know that the disease, it tells you, screw these people. You don't owe them nothing. You're a World Series hero. These people forgot all about you when you were gone. But I tell you, just sitting here with you for this past hour, this incredible strength in your character and sobriety. And by writing that article, you're making amends to the people you have wronged. And that's a very powerful statement, in my opinion. And I have total respect for that, sir.
By this time, I had a spiritual life. So, making amends, or whatever you want to call it, it becomes a part of the spiritual life. And I'll tell you what happened with that article. One thing that happened with the article that I did in the Kansas City Star. The reporter asked me, what did I want to do with my life since I've gotten out of prison? And one of the things I said was that I would like to go around and do speaking engagements and try to help other people.
Right.
One of my old fans that used to watch me as a player, he wrote back in the comment, and he said, and I quote, Willie Aikens just got out of prison and he want to go around and do speaking engagements. He said, I remember Willie Aikens when he was a ball player and he couldn't get on TV and do an interview because he stutters. So how did he think he can get up in front of a crowd and share his testimony and help people?
Right.
I'll never forget that. But that was how bad I stuttered, and that was how people knew me.
Right.
They knew that was a part of Willie Aikens, that he was a stutterer. But praise God, he's taking that away from me.
Praise God. And you're just an amazing person, man. So I can't help but think when I look at you, right? When I think of a ball player today, I kind of think of like Josh Hamilton, and I'm just wondering, did you ever reach out to Josh Hamilton?
I did. Matter of fact, maybe 4 or 5 years ago when he was playing for the Texas Rangers, we share our complex with Texas Rangers.
Oh, okay.
And I signed one of my books, and I took it over to the Texas Rangers, and I gave it to Josh Hamilton. And we sat down and had a conversation, and I shared my testimony with him. So yes, I reached out to him. I gave him a book, and he ended up having some more trouble and everything with drugs, and he eventually got out of baseball. But
right.
And that's the sickness of the addiction, man.
It is. It really is. I mean, you think you got a beat, and that's when it really rears its ugly head on you.
Yeah.
I got two huge Willie Mays Aikens fans in my audience right now. They wanted me to ask you a question. Ben Muth out of Topeka, Kansas. He wrote me, how bitter was it to hit 4 home runs, driving a game-winning RBI, and still fall short in that 1980 World Series?
Well, the 1980 World Series was the highlight of my professional baseball career.
Mm-hmm.
And the first 2 home run night was on my birthday. And I think I was the first player to hit home runs on my birthday, too. And I didn't know it at the time. It was a record. I was the first and only player at that time to have multiple home runs in the World Series.
Yeah. Only Chase
How did I know that?
Right. Only Chase Utley's done it since, yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still in the record books, but it's the most profound and wonderful thing that ever happened to me as a professional baseball player, because most players, they play their whole baseball career and don't even make it to the World Series.
And in a short series, anything can happen, man. Anything can happen. Sometimes the best team does not win a short series. That's just the way it goes.
Well, I felt then, and I still feel now, that we had a better team than the Philadelphia Phillies.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times, just like you said, the best team don't win.
Yeah.
It's the team that plays. It's the team that plays the best in that short series.
That's right. That's right. And my second fan, Leo Jane out of Melbourne, Australia, he was telling me about the time he saw you hit your first major league triple against the White Sox, and he was telling me how much he enjoyed watching you huff and puff your way around the bases, and he was curious if you had any recollections at all of it.
I don't.
360 feet is a lot of feet, ain't it?
Yeah, and I probably should remember this, because I only had maybe 3 or 4 triples, I think, in
Baseball Reference has you at 2.
my whole baseball career.
Right.
But I remember that.
He said he just couldn't stop laughing seeing you on third base. He just imagined you huffing and puffing. Okay.
What?
Before we get out of here, I like to do a thing with all the guys. It's called Who Owned Who. Did the pitcher own you, or did you own the pitcher? I want to check out your mental Rolodex of yours if I can real quick. For example, if I say Jerry Kuzman, former Mets, Twins, White Sox pitcher, did you own him, or did he own you?
He owned me.
He did own you. You were 5 for 24, 208 batting average, 7 Ks against Mr. Kuzman.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about this earlier. Dennis Martinez.
I used to kill Dennis.
Brother, you most definitely owned my boy Denny. 10 for 35, 286, 3 home runs, 9 RBIs. He did get you for 5 Ks, but you dominated Denny.
No doubt.
Dave Steeb.
I used to kill him too.
You did. 12 for 31, 387, 3 doubles, 2 home runs, 4 RBIs.
Yeah.
Former Brewer pitcher, Moose Haas.
I used to kill him too.
Actually, he got you. You were 5 for 36, 139 average.
Okay.
You had 1 home run, but you had 4 strikeouts against him.
Okay.
Tommy John.
He probably got me.
Believe it or not, you owned Mr. John. 11 for 26, 423 average, 2 doubles, 3 RBIs, 2 walks. 2 more pitchers for you.
I know. I got 3 hits in the playoffs against him in 1980.
You won't forget that, will you?
No.
That's when he was on the Yankees, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Yankees, right. Okay, here you go. Jim Palmer.
I used to hit well against Jim.
Actually, he got you. You were 5 for 26. You had a home run. You had some sort of RBIs, but you only batted 192, 4 Ks. Okay. You did have some production against him, though. Last pitcher, Jack Morse.
Oh, yeah. Last time I faced him, I think I hit two home runs against him.
I love it when you say, "Oh yeah." You didn't even have to answer; you knew the answer. You absolutely destroyed Jack Morris, another Hall of Fame pitcher. 17 for 45, 378 batting average, 5 doubles, 4 home runs, 13 RBIs off of Jack Morris.
Yeah. Somebody that you didn't meet or mention that absolutely used to own me, man.
Who was that?
Louisiana Lightning.
Really, Ron Guidry, huh?
Ron Guidry.
I wish I would have came across that.
I finally got him in the playoffs in 1980. I hit a 2-run single to beat him.
He was just that tough left-on-left opponent,
yes,
huh?
Yep.
Unbelievable.
He threw 95, 96, and he had that slider that looked like a fastball.
Well, Willie, I got to tell you, man, this has been one of the most enjoyable hours I've ever sat down with a former player. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I am truly humbled by this interview. And hopefully maybe sometime in the future you come back in and we do it again sometime.
Thanks for having me, Jack. I really appreciate it, brother.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Willie. You have a great night. I'm going to let you go, and I'll send you a text message in a couple of days. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, man. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
God bless you. And there you have it, folks. Wow. That was pretty freaking intense. That was Willie Aikens live in a one-on-one interview with me, Jake the Snake Robinson, here on Backwards K, live on the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network. And I am just overwhelmed by the conversation that I just had with that man. Before we get out of here, I want to plug a couple things. My man, Michael Ford, he's a writer out in Fresno. He writes for the Clovis Roundup, so you can go to clovisroundup.com. Click on the Michael Ford icon. All his great writings will come up. Enjoy yourself. He's a hell of a writer. You can check out our YouTube channel. It's the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network. We'd like to get some subscribers in there. That way we can go on and do live shows out of YouTube. And you can also find me on Twitter at JRobbie1, JROBBIE1, and at LTBPodNet. Like I said, I'm Jake Robinson from the Jake Robinson Sports Experience. This is the Backwards K. I'm coming live out of Paulie's Island, South Carolina. I want to thank you guys for coming out. It's been a hell of an interview. And namaste. Thank you for your time. I love all of you out there in the baseball universe. Thank you for coming out. God bless, and good night.